Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Ariel Hunter. I am the Community Outreach Coordinator here at the Elkhorn Slough Reserve. Today, I'm actually coming to you as less of a Community Outreach Coordinator and more of a huge iNaturalist nerd. And I am so thrilled to be sharing some background on iNaturalist and hoping to get more people involved in tracking our biodiversity here in California and across the world. As with all of our live presentations, we are recording this, so if you have to leave, that's okay. You can watch it later. Feel free to post comments in the chat box or in the comment section down at the bottom. I will try to answer a few questions live at the end of my presentation, which is about 20 minutes or so. But if I can't answer your presentation live, I will get to it later on in the comments. I will find an answer and get back to you later. If you're just joining us, please let us know where you're coming from and what your favorite species to find is. And I know that may be a very hard one. My favorite species changes day to day, I'm sure. But I would have to say that right now, my favorite species to find around town is Grindelia stricta, which is Oregon gum plant, which is typically found more towards the coast, but occasionally you can find it a little more inland and has beautiful, bright, like neon yellow flowers that bloom in summer instead of spring. So I've been finding those everywhere and they always make me very happy because yellow is a very happy color. So welcome. Again, feel free to drop your questions in at any time. And I also invite those of you who are avid iNaturalists like me to please throw your tips and your strategies, things that you use to improve your iNaturalist experience into the comment box as well, because this is a forum and should be a place for everybody to find feedback. So without much ado, we're gonna jump in. This presentation was born out of our California Biodiversity Day celebration. California Biodiversity Day was started a couple years ago as a way to document California's biodiversity. And biodiversity is just a measure of all of the living things and the variety of living things within a place. So within a habitat, within a whole state, and across the world. And scientists are interested in biodiversity because it often is a measure of the success of a habitat, and often multiple organisms rely on a certain level of biodiversity, a certain number of species and keystone species like our otter featured here. So California Biodiversity Day is a day to celebrate the incredible organisms that call California home. Many of them only live and are only found here in California, kind of like the southern sea otter here. And it's also a day to go out and track biodiversity and help scientists log what's living here right now. So this presentation will be focused around a tool that we use to do that, which is called iNaturalist. This is a tool that is sponsored by the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco and National Geographic, and is basically a network for scientists, like these young scientists here in the image, to track the biodiversity of our world. And it relies on community scientists, which are anybody. They could be myself, a plant geek who just likes to go hiking and take pictures of pretty flowers. They could be my neighbor who knows nothing about wildlife, but loves seeing organisms and loves finding out what they are and unique fun facts about them. Or it could be somebody with an advanced PhD who specializes in one or two species of mollusks. So lots of people can be community scientists. And the idea is that many people going out into nature, documenting what's there, can yield more data on what's actually in our world than just one scientist or a couple organizations going out. So I'll be sharing some background on how to get involved with iNaturalist and how to use it both for yourself and how to make really good observations with it that can help scientists and land managers with the work that they do. I do want to acknowledge, though, that right now we have orange skies out here. All of California, all of the West Coast is seeing an unprecedented fire season. And I know that you may not be able to safely get out and explore this week during California Biodiversity Week, and that is okay. We want you to stay safe. We want you to stay safe mentally and physically. But I will say that during a huge disturbance like these wildfires is when this kind of data, this community science data, becomes more important than usual. Because when you have a huge disturbance like a wildfire or like a storm or a landslide, if you don't have a log of what was living in that site before that disturbance, it's really hard to restore that area or to measure how well you're doing at restoring that area. And so if we do have a log, and iNaturalist has been here for a while and has built us here in California and across the world a great background information database on what lives here, we can use it as a tool to help us restore and to help us rebuild after this. So again, I just want to acknowledge that our hearts are with all of the folks impacted by these fires, all of the people fighting them, and just stay safe as you're going out there. Within iNaturalist, I mentioned that this is kind of a network of community scientists, and within that there are observers, which are folks that are going out and they are taking observations, which is what we'll talk about how you can do today. And there's also identifiers. So these are people who have either an expert knowledge on specific organisms or people who are just really avid plant biologists or snail biologists, or, you know, me, a geek who really likes seaweeds. And they can go on and they can identify the observations that the observers make. And these two groups of people together help to create this database that we'll be looking into. I love iNaturalist personally because I think it really gives people a way to track their experiences in nature. It helps me actually notice things that I probably wouldn't see before, things that might be hidden under logs that I might not necessarily look at. But it also gets people to go out and really take mental logs of what they're seeing here and really appreciate nature more. It's also a great way to get kids to get involved with the nature around them and look closer and build those observation skills that any naturalist relies on. So it's a great tool for observation. It's a great tool for learning and building your own knowledge. It is a huge database at this point. So these are all of the observations that were made across the world as of last night. It's probably changed since then. There's probably been a few more added. You can see that there's tons of different observations. And sometimes they're things like bugs, like you see on the right side here. Sometimes they're mammals, sometimes they're amphibians. They cross all over all kinds of different taxa. And you can look at and explore all of those things. So if you're just interested and curious about these organisms, you can learn about things that live in the Serengeti from your home. You can also look at just specific species and find where that species lives. So I pulled up all of the observations of the southern sea otter, which we know here in the Elkhorn Slough is a really common organism to find in this spot. But worldwide, they're really rare. And even within California, you can see that on average, they're only really seen along the southern coast here. And you can use this tool, iNaturalist, to explore those sightings and see where that species of interest is. You can also use it to look at all of the organisms that might be found in your favorite local park. So when you search Elkhorn Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve, this gives you a snapshot of all of the different sightings that have been made out here. And they're all color coded. So these little pins out here, some of them are invertebrates, some of them are plants, fungi, animals like our birds and our amphibians, and you can get a good idea of all the organisms that live in a place that you're going to go visit or in a place that you just visited. So it's a great exploration tool. You can also cross-reference and you can look at all of the species in one area. So this is all of the recent sea otter sightings within the Elkhorn Slough National Estuarine Reserve. And you can see they are all over the area. So this is just an awesome tool for you to be able to expand your knowledge. And you can see how it's a tool that scientists can actually use and pull data from when they are trying to build their databases or when they're trying to publish papers on different subjects. So I'm going to take you through real quick an intro to how you use iNaturalist. I will say I am doing this off of an Android phone. It's slightly different on an iPhone, but not too different that I think you'd get lost. What you do need to do is you do need, if you're going to join, to make an iNaturalist account. It is free. And there is an app for it. So you can either upload observations to a desktop, or you can upload with an app, the iNaturalist app, out in the field. So if you're using the app, you'll get a list of your observations, which if you're just new to this, will be 0, but we're not. So we've got a few observations already loaded in. And if you want to take an observation, if you see a lizard or you see a plant and you want to document it, you find the little green arrow down at the bottom there. And when you press that green arrow, it gives you the option, a couple different options. One is you can take a photo of it live. You can also choose an image. So if you already took a photo and you're uploading it from the field, you can do that as well. You can submit it without a photo, but we'll talk about later how that's not always the best. That's just if you have a bird that flies away really fast and you couldn't get a photo, you can still document it. It's just not as useful as if you have that photo. So you always want to try to take a photo. But you can also notice that you can upload sound and record sound. So if you can't see that bird, can't get a photo of that bird, you can still document it if you can hear it and you can record it. And this is an example of a photo that I took. I took this picture in my backyard and I uploaded it. And when you take the picture, it gives you a couple of different details that you want to put in. So it wants to know the date, it wants to know your location, and it is possible to turn that off if you're somebody who does not want to give permission for seeing location. It just makes it a little harder on you because you have to upload it later. But it'll collect some of this information on its own, and then it needs you, or the observation needs you to fill in some extra notes. So you can put in notes if you had something specific that you noticed that was super weird, you can add it in there and document it. And you can select on that top portion by the question mark, what did you see? And this pulls up a list of suggestions. And this is a really cool tool for those of you like me who really want to kind of know what they're looking at in the field or get an idea. That said, the first option that comes up on this screen is not necessarily exactly what you saw. iNaturalist is usually good about using appropriate scientific language. It mentions that there's a bougainvillea and that this plant is probably in the bougainvillea family, but that it doesn't know the exact species. So you may have to kind of look through these options to figure out what exactly you're looking at. Give me one moment. I just lost my little feed here. When you select, and what's really cool about this is you can actually, before selecting which organism you think it might be, you can click on one of the options and you can compare your image that you collected to an actual guide image of what that plant is. So if we open up Bougainvillea spectabilis, I can actually select compare and compare my image to an image from a guidebook. So I can make that comparison and say, yes, I think this is definitely my species, or no, I don't think it is, and then move from there. So it does contain a guide. I know a couple of you have mentioned Seek by iNaturalist, and so I would like to mention at this moment that Seek is an app designed by the iNaturalist folks. It is super useful for identifying stuff in the field. Seek and the photos that you upload to it don't go to iNaturalist though. So they can't be used by scientists. And so that's where there's kind of a difference between iNaturalist as a platform and Seek. So I use Seek when I want to know what something is, but I usually try to take a picture and then upload it to iNaturalist as well. Seek is like your info guide. iNaturalist is your data sheet that you're going to send to the scientists. So it's a little more useful, but Seek is a great personal guide to use as well. And I highly recommend exploring that one too. So you can spend as long as you need to comparing these, or you could just say, I have no idea what this thing is. I just know that it's a plant. You can type in plant and put that. If that's all you know, that's totally fine. I figured that it was probably a bougainvillea, and so that's what I selected. I wasn't quite sure on the species, so I left that blank. And when I went to upload this, you can see that it's added for me that classification that I put on it, that it's in the bougainvillea family. And it's also got all of that information there. You'll notice that I checked a box at the bottom that says, is it captive or cultivated? That's a good thing to remember, especially folks who are new to iNaturalist. A lot of times we take practice observations in our backyard on plants that we already know what they are. But if you planted it, that plant is different from a plant that's growing in the wild. And if you're a scientist studying biodiversity, you're probably not interested in my backyard bougainvillea. And so by selecting that it was a captive or cultivated plant, it just lets scientists know that this is data that they might not need to pull from, or might not be, interested in pulling from as much. And that's it. You press the check mark, you upload your observation, and it is added to this ongoing list that you can scroll through and look at around your area. I will say that sometimes out in the field, and when I say out in the field, I mean out like way out in the field where there's no internet reception, there's not a lot of cell service. I don't always use the actual app itself here to upload, because sometimes it comes back with errors. And a good example of this is under my bougainvillea post, there's an American dog tick, which we do see lots of here at the Elkhorn Slough Reserve. And then underneath that, there's this one that says furrow bees, and it says no location. It showed up as no location because I took a picture with no internet service and it couldn't find my location. So that's an observation where later on I'd have to go back and edit it. So just know that technology is limited by the same constraints that humans are. And so sometimes you may want to decide whether you're going to take photos out in the field and then come back and upload them to your desktop later or your phone later, or if you're gonna take your phone out to be able to document. It just depends on what kind of service you have in the area. And it's still something that you can easily, I can actually go in and edit that location, which I will do later because I forgot to do it earlier today. And that's it. So it's a pretty easy process to go out and take an observation. All you need are your eyeballs and a smartphone of some kind so that you can snap those photos. And once you're done, you get this database, or you get your own kind of cultivated database that just shows all of the observations you made. And surprise, surprise, all of ours were made at the Elkhorn Slough Reserve. All of my personal ones are all over California. But you can actually go through and see all of your different observations that you've made over time and across different places. Now you'll notice that there's these markers underneath some of your observations that say things like research grade and casual. And that is what's called an observation grade. And that's something that is given to an observation that you made based off how reliable it is. So when scientists are looking at a picture that you send in, they want to know that it was taken in the place that it says and that it's a reliable observation. And so there's a couple of checks that iNaturalist will look through on your recorded observation to determine whether it's a useful one for scientists. So it needs to have a date, it needs to have a location. You'll notice that it says it has to have photo or sound. So again, if you upload an observation without a photo, you know, it's still, I like to say it's still good data because I look at all sorts of different things. I look at the casual grade observations as well. But it's not as useful to somebody who is a scientist putting together and publishing a paper. So I would say you definitely want to look at how you can best get a photo of the stuff that you're going to see. Give me 1 second. We've got a lot of restoration work going on. My apologies. So you want to ideally upload photo, you want to upload sound. There's also some things that they'll check off, like one, is the organism wild? So again, if it's a cultivated plant, they're probably not going to send it to the scientists. And then if you can identify it or it can get identified to a species level, it can be considered research grade. And that means that not only has it been identified to a species, so we know what it is, but it's also been supported by others in the iNaturalist community. So that's where those folks who are identifiers come in, is they look at your observation, they say either they agree with you that it is this one species, or they disagree and suggest another one. But when you have at least 2 to 3 people who agree that the photo or image that you took is the species that you put, it then gets considered research grade and can be used by other sites. So this observation that I took a while back has actually been used by the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which uses and collects data for scientists who are publishing papers. And I'll show you that website later on. I know a couple questions came in asking about whether you can upload video or not. As far as I know, you can't upload video, but I'll have to check into that one because I've never tried. I think it's just image or sound, but you can upload multiple images and multiple recordings or sound recordings. So you don't have to feel limited to just one, and we'll talk about that in a second too. This is an observation, the qualities for an observation that is research grade. Let's look at one that is not research grade. So this is a different observation I took, and you'll notice down here at the bottom, the one thing that I didn't meet on the checklist was that I hadn't identified it to species level or lower. And so that's okay, right? Because it just gets this label that says need ID up at the top. And that means that other identifiers in the community can still go and find this observation and identify it to species level. So this is an example of what that observation I just walked you through, the bougainvillea, would come up as, because I had only identified it to a genus or a family rather than all the way down to species. So if you want your observations to be used by scientists, you want to try to identify it to species level, and you want to be able to get a couple of other people to agree with you on it. Now, how do you make it a good observation that you can get a research grade level put onto it? There's a couple of different things that you can do as somebody who maybe doesn't know the species that will help other identifiers in the iNaturalist community figure out what your species is. Because by no means do you need to know every organism out there. You just need to take a good enough picture that other people on iNaturalist can identify it and agree with it. So I really love this stock photo that I pulled off of a beautiful tide pool. This is a great example of a gorgeous image that would be a really bad iNaturalist post, because there are like 7 different organisms in this photo. And so if I am an identifier and I'm looking at this and you've put invertebrate as the label, I have no idea which one of these you're trying to identify. It's also kind of difficult because it doesn't zero in on any of the organisms. So there's a couple of like cowrie snails in the middle of that photo, but I would like to see some of the features along the side of the snail shell to actually identify it. So as beautiful as this photo is, and by all means, take beautiful photos, you wouldn't want to upload this to iNaturalist. What you could do is you could zero in, you could actually take a photo of each of these organisms separately and upload them individually. So you could take a photo of the anemone, upload that as an observation to iNaturalist. You could take another photo of the sea urchin, upload that one, and same with the sea star here. And it is amazing. It feels a little bit tedious sometimes, but it's a really good way to find out just how many things actually live in a tide pool or in a grassland outside, because you go to take a picture and you realize that there's 7 different organisms that you could upload to iNaturalist just in that one tide pool or just in that one spot. So always try to upload a picture that shows just the organism if it's possible. Sometimes it's hard to do that. This is a photo that I uploaded, I think about a year ago, that shows gooseneck barnacles, which are these light looking things in the center here. They are really cool if you've ever seen them in the tide pools. And the problem with this picture is, just like the other one, there's a lot of things here. So it's a little bit easier to tell that I was trying to go for gooseneck barnacles because they're towards the middle, but there's still a lot going on. And what I would say is you would want to upload this picture with a second picture that just zeroes in on the thing you're identifying. So if you are in a space where you really can't you just can't zero in on just the only organism, take a picture of all of the organisms and then upload a second picture of just the zeroed in one that you're looking at. And somebody did mention, can you put multiple pictures of the same sighting to help with ID? Absolutely. So back, I'm going to do the awful thing that presenters do that I hate when they do, but I'm going to do it. Back when you were uploading your observation, you'll notice that up by your picture it says first, and there's another camera sign. If you select that camera sign, you can take a picture again, and you can upload a first photo and then a second and then a third and then a fourth. And I really wouldn't recommend doing more than like 4 photos, but you can upload multiple pictures. You don't have to stick with just one. So definitely use that multiple photo feature on there. So this is, again, a good example of how you might want to take one photo and then submit a second one that's zeroed in. This is a better photo where it's a little more clear that the thing that I want to see is right there in the center. But you'll notice that at some point, it's really hard, especially with organisms, to get everything out of the photo. So don't worry about it too much. Just try to get some good photos as best you can and see how good you can do on it. There's no way to not get everything because there's all sorts of microscopic things that live out there. Another issue that comes up with people trying to submit photos is that sometimes your lighting is not good. So this is a great photo if I wanted to use it for a camouflage challenge, but it's hard to see that there is a lizard in this photo. And it's even harder to tell that this is indeed a Western fence lizard because all we can see is that somewhere here in the middle, there's a lizard body shape, but we can't see the face. We can't see the identifying blue belly on the side. This is not an ideal photo. This could be, again, one photo that you submit combined with a photo a little bit closer that shows some of its features. So when you're dealing with lighting, it can be a little bit hard because sometimes your phone looks good in the moment. This is a photo that I thought looked good in the moment, and then later on I realized was not that quality. So I recommend taking a couple different photos from a couple different angles within reason, and with the knowledge that sometimes your subject runs away. So if this is the only photo that you got before that lizard ran away, you can still upload it. It's okay. It just may not get to research grade. So again, you want to go as much as you can towards making your photo absolutely ideal. But if it doesn't meet everything, don't sweat it too much. But try to get your lighting good. Here's an example of a photo that is a little bit bad in itself, because you can tell there's a plant there, but there's a lot going on. So what I did when I uploaded this observation was I took a whole picture of the plant, and then I also uploaded a picture of its flower, zeroed in so you could tell there's a flower, and you could see the leaf patterns, which is especially important when you're uploading plant pictures, because there's often identifying features on a plant are like how the leaf wraps around the stem, or those little serrations that you see on the side of this Grindelia plant's leaves. So getting a good picture of the leaf and the flower. And then the third photo I uploaded with this observation was an image of these little spiky balls that are filled with gum that show up on Oregon gum plant, because I know what this plant is, but I also know that somebody else who wanted to agree with me may need to see some of those identifying features in order to feel confident agreeing that this is indeed what I say it is, Grindelia stricta. So again, even if you know the species, you want to get lots of those identifiable photos and identifiable features in there so that somebody else agrees with you. Because if you have a photo and you say that it's this species, but nobody else agrees with you, you don't have that second verification, and so it won't be a research grade photo. So definitely feel free to use multiple photo features on there. And there's one last category that I want to share. Animal prints and tracks, you can definitely upload to iNaturalist. And there are good tracks and there are harder tracks to try to interpret. So the image on the right is this coyote footprint. And I think it's a coyote. It could also be a dog because it was in a park where there was space. It could be other things as well. It's a little hard to tell the scale. The lighting's a little bit off. So this is an observation that maybe wouldn't get research grade because we can't quite tell what it is. The prints on the left are really clear, and they're also showing the habitat around the area. There's a little bit more of a scale, although it'd be nice if there was like something like a journal or something next to it so we could see how big it is. And the shape of the paws helps me to know that this is a sea otter track. And this is indeed a sea otter print. So if you've never seen what they look like, they look kind of like beaver prints because they're in the same group. This is something that, because there's really only one animal that would be in this habitat making that print, this could be research grade observation on iNaturalist. So again, it comes down to how can you kind of manipulate your photos a little bit so that they're going to be the absolute ideal for somebody else. You're really just setting it up so that somebody else can look at it and without knowing you, without being where you were, they can still look at your images and go, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is, which can be really hard. So it's something that you'll have to play around with and decide for yourself on how much you use it. So with that, I'm gonna take a couple of questions that came in about taking photos, and then I wanted to take you over to the iNaturalist webpage so that we could explore some of the features on there for the last few minutes here. So a couple folks, again, had said uploading video. I still don't know, I'm gonna have to look it up. Somebody asked, how long between taking the photo and uploading it can you wait? You can wait pretty much indefinitely, as long as you remember where you took the photo, because when you go to upload it later on, it won't have the location automatically in there. And that is a good note because I know I often take photos out in the field, come home, and the next day go to upload them, and you will have to check your location because it will automatically think that you're taking the photo where you're standing. So I've had a couple times where I've uploaded an observation and it says that I saw a sea otter in my house, which is not true. So you do have to kind of edit it if you upload it later. But you can upload a week later, a month later, a year later. It's ideal though to do it within a couple of days, because if it was something unique or if it was something that, you know, was like an invasive species that somebody might want to know about being out there, if you upload it a year later, it's probably hard for them to actually go out and find it. So ideally, I would say upload it within, you know, a couple days to a week of when you spotted it. That's what I usually try to stick to. Folks said absolutely shared that they use field sketching to along with iNaturalist. And I say that's a great idea because a lot of the things in iNaturalist help you to be a better field sketcher, right? These tips and tricks for how to make a photo look more identifiable, you can translate that to journaling and to your nature journal and how to create a scientific illustration that looks identifiable and that really highlights the features of an organism. And I'm just going to check. Looks like most of the questions that came in recently, I answered. So again, if there's other questions that come up, please feel free to share them. But I'm going to take you all real quick over to iNaturalist. I did want to mention, this is that Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So this is another cool website that uses a lot of the research grade images from iNaturalist. And so you can see that there's a bunch of publishing institutions that have used that data, and there's peer reviews papers that have used that data. So it feels kind of good to know that your data went specifically to something. When you have your home page on a desktop, it looks like this, and you'll notice that the desktop's really great because it gives you a lot more options than a teeny tiny phone does. And from here, you can go and look at your observations and pull up each of them individually. Here's also where you can edit your observations. So later on today, I will go into this observation here that says furrow bees, and I will click edit, and I will open up the editing tool, which is very easy to use and very straightforward. I can probably open it up real quick. Our internet has been very stable today. And you can add the location here. So you can either type it in or you can scroll around and pin it on the map. You can also add more photos if you have other ones that you took that you didn't upload in the field. And you can, I believe, change what you saw or add notes to it. So again, your observations are editable. You can definitely go back and edit their location, or, you know, if something disconnected, you can go and fix it later on. You can also look at your, or apologies, this is that main page. So this is where, again, you would go to find all the observations in the world. And you'll notice since last night, we finally hit 49 million observations made. That's a lot. 1 million, over 1 million people observing. So that's 1 million people across the world who are documenting organisms and getting closer to nature and exploring. And over 200,000 species, almost 300,000 that have been identified. And there are absolutely more out there that need to be identified. So this is a great tool that you can use. I mentioned that there's folks who observe, and then there's folks who identify. And the identifiers can access the observations that need identification that are in that category where they're not research grade yet by going to the Identify tab. And it will generate just a bunch of random ones for you. If you are a person who has a great general knowledge of all sorts of things, or you can select specific species that you specialize in. So I often select just seaweeds because that's where most of my knowledge is. And you can select a place to identify if you know or have a good general knowledge of one specific park. Like maybe you're a docent here at the Elkhorn Slough Reserve, and so you're going to select that place because you probably know those things, but maybe you don't know all of the insect species in the Serengeti, right? Which, because you can't know everything in the world, unfortunately. And when you see, you'll notice that some of these little observations that need to be identified, some of them say unknown. So that's where somebody submitted a picture and said, I have no idea what this thing is. And that's okay to do too. You don't have to take those suggestions that iNaturalist gives you. You can just say, I don't know what this is. Somebody else, please tell me what this is. That's fine. So if this is one that you open up, if you know the species, or if you just know that it's a plant, which would be what I would do, you can open that up and say that, and that helps others start to identify it better. You can also see that there are some that have a little bit closer of a group. So this observation put insects. They know that the thing they took a picture of is an insect, but they don't know what species it is. That's really helpful because when somebody who's an entomologist types into that species bar insects, that observation will come up, whereas the unknown observation won't because it doesn't have any tag. So they always tell you to, identify to your best knowledge. If you know that it's an insect, put insect, right? That's okay. You don't have to put unknown if you don't know the species. Just put as close as you can to its specific taxonomy. And then some of them, like you'll see on this great blue heron, this one, if I open it up, it has it identified as the species. And right now it's just relying on other people agreeing and saying, yes, that looks like a great blue heron. And you'll notice that it's got 2 people who also agree. And so it's been moved up to research grade, probably in the last few minutes. So you can go through and you can help identify these. And the more of these observations that get identified, the more data goes into that pile that can be used by scientists. So again, we need observers who go out and document what they're seeing, but we also really do need identifiers who have the knowledge, who have that specific species knowledge, who can come in and help organize those observations. So, and it's also a great way, if you want to build your identification skills, this is a great way to do it. Because it usually tells you, I'll see if I can open it up. When you go to add an ID, you can also add comments, and it usually asks you to tell them why you think it is. And not everybody uses that feature, but especially if you're a teacher trying to get your students to learn the scientific language and learn how to work like a scientist, you can have them explain why they think something is, and practice that scientific language. The more category here has a couple other cool places that you can go and check out. One of them is the iNaturalist guides. So this is a section that has some collections of observations from different places or different state parks or whatever across the world that you can use when you go to visit those places. So again, you have your iNaturalist on your phone already. You can go and access these when you're at the spot. So if you forgot your field guide, iNaturalist can actually be a really useful field guide. They also have a section that provides taxa info. So if you're curious about some of these organisms and some of their classifications, you could do a deep dive into the arachnids of the world or of the plants of the world. There's a lot of information here to learn and to explore with and to use to enhance your other knowledge of other things. And then, of course, I could not teach you everything in a 20, slightly longer, 40-minute presentation. So iNaturalist has tons of different tutorials, everything from how to upload an observation, how to put it into the site, and you'll notice how to take better photos for iNaturalist. So I encourage you to take advantage of the resources that they have already built into the site because they are quite plentiful. And the last thing that I wanted to share, what I wanted to share was that a lot of people, myself included, when they first join iNaturalist, really struggle with this idea of where do they start? Because you walk out into nature and it just seems like there's so much, or it feels like there's nothing and you're not sure where to go. Truly, you start wherever, because there is living things all around you. If you are sitting in your home, there are several species of arachnid living in your house. In fact, there's an arachnid in the corner over here. That's an observation. That's something you can document. So know that there's always something around you to document. Some specific places that I recommend you start at is, one, joining an iNaturalist project. So I will share in the comments of this post the link to the web page that has all of the California Biodiversity Day shenanigans that are going on, which include bioblitzes, biodiversity scavenger hunts, and iNaturalist projects that you can join. And these projects tend to be like Birds of California, or insects in Henry Cowell State Park. They often are specific to a site or to a species. And so that's a good place because it guides you. You can say, okay, well, I'm going to go look for birds because that's the project that I'm joining. My favorite way of finding what I'm going to document is documenting what's underfoot. So when I'm standing, especially if I'm standing in a mud flat or out in the intertidal, I'm going to document whatever I see right in front of me, right underneath my big toe. And I'm going to start there. And then I'm going to see where the next step I take, what that yields me. Because again, there's always going to be something there to document, whether it's a plant or whether it's a bug or whatever. And then you can also use journal prompts. And this is where, again, nature journaling really goes hand in hand, I think, with iNaturalist, because you can use a prompt that came from your 8th grade science journal to inspire you to go start your exploration. And if you're looking for useful journal prompts, especially teachers, all this week we've been posting on the Reserve Facebook page different biodiversity scavenger hunts. And they are aimed at getting you started taking observations and exploring biodiversity. But really, you can start wherever. Our goal is we just want you to get out there and to explore. And with that, that's the end of my formal presentation. I'll go back to this beautiful observation page that shows everything across the world. If you have a question now that I haven't answered yet, now's a great time to throw it into the feed. There's a couple on here that says, can I upload photos that have my copyright watermark on them? This is something that I have to look into a little bit. iNaturalist does, when you submit a photo to them, they do take some rights to be able to publish it and to use it for scientific papers. So I would have to look into whether or not a watermark is allowable with it. And if you have a photo that you, like if you are personally a photographer and you have a photo that you want to use for a calendar or for something you're producing, I would probably recommend not using that photo for iNaturalist, because again, this is a database. It's going to be used by many people, and so there's just an increased chance that it's going to get taken. But I believe most of the photos are covered under the common copyright laws, which again don't cover too much. People can use them in presentations and the like. So again, I wouldn't necessarily upload a photo that I wanted to use for myself or that I wanted to keep to myself, but I will look into whether you can put a watermark on it and try to answer that in the comments after the presentation. Somebody also asked, can photos be uploaded to iNaturalist from a camera? You can't upload, so like if you have like a good camera, like a Canon or, you know, the actual cameras, not just a smartphone camera, it would have to have like a smartphone connection to it, because you can only upload through the iNaturalist app or through iNaturalist.org on your desktop. So if you're taking photos with a large camera, which I highly recommend, because especially getting photos of birds on your smartphone is super hard. If you have a good camera, use that, but you do have to upload the photos later on. So you can, however you usually upload your photos to your computer, you can go into observations on your main page on iNaturalist.org, and you can select add observations, and it will load a page that lets you upload that file. So you can see, you can either choose photos or select from other import options, which may include plugging directly into your phone. But out in the field, you wouldn't be able to take a photo on like a Canon camera and then upload it directly. You would have to have a computer or a smartphone device to be able to merge those two worlds together. And it looks like that's all of the questions that I got in here. So again, I want to thank you all for tuning in today, for hanging out with me. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. We every year do a couple bio blitzes, which is where you and a bunch of people go out into a habitat and you document as many things as possible, and it helps really build just a baseline of what the organisms there are. And unfortunately this year, because of COVID-19 restrictions, we have not been able to host those bio blitzes, but I encourage you to do a self-guided bio blitz, either at your house or just out in your front yard, and go out and explore what's there. Because if all of us are taking observations, if all of us are taking these notes, we are creating a log that people can pull from for the future, and we are helping to improve our science going forward. So again, thank you for joining me. I hope you're having a good time. I hope you were safe, and happy California Biodiversity Week. Till next time.